Okay, so here we are. Good afternoon. My name is Gorman Lee. I'm a K-12 director of social studies for the Braintree Public Schools. I'm also a member of the Massachusetts Council for the Social Studies. And I want to thank you all for coming to today's presentation workshop titled Finding Freedom with Linda Dean, who is from the Museum of the American Revolution, and she's live streaming from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I just want to say that this is a museum that opened 3 years ago.
Yeah, we opened in 2017.
Yeah, 2017. So about 4 years ago, and I'm bad. I've been meaning to come down to Philadelphia to visit, and I was hoping I would do that this December at the national conference. But now that the national conference in DC has been canceled, I'm going to try to find a way this spring and summer. I'm really kind of looking forward to visiting the museum. But I'm going to hand over the controls to Linda. Thank you for presenting. And all right, you're on. You're on.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So again, my name is Linda Dean, and I am from the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. Just a little bit about myself. Before I joined the museum 2 years ago, I was actually a teacher, just like most of you. I was a high school history teacher in New Jersey for 13 years, and I taught AP United States History and AP United States Government. So I, familiar with teachers and what they need, and hopefully you'll find today's presentation interesting. I'm going to kind of walk you through one of our exciting interactives. One of the main goals of our museum is, well, first of all, I know there's only a couple of you here with me today, but has anyone ever been to our museum in Philadelphia? So hopefully you will come, oh, not yet, okay. Hopefully you will come to hopefully you will come to the museum soon. And what's kind of surprising to people when they do come to our museum is we tell a really rich variety of stories. So when you come to the museum, you're not just going to find information about George Washington or Alexander Hamilton or Marquis de Lafayette. Sure, we have all of those stories in our museum, but we like to explore and unpack all of the stories. A diverse story is what we're aiming for. We tell the rich and complicated era of the American Revolution through various different stories. And I'm going to share with you today one of the ways that we do that. So let me start sharing my screen. And okay, so can everyone see our website there? Okay. Oh, this is exciting. We actually have a new exhibit that's open, and this exhibit will actually last a year, so hopefully you'll come to see it. But here we have, here is our home site. And if you go to Learn and Explore, you'll see that we have various different interactive features. And the one that I'm going to focus today is an interactive feature called Finding Freedom. So if we just go, I'm going to click on that. Okay, so this is really, we probably spent about 5-6 years putting this interactive together. And what this does, it explores the stories of 5 men and women of African descent who are living in war-torn Virginia. So when we go to launch the feature, I'm just going to walk you through one of these stories. But before we do that, I just want to ask you a question. Okay, so here we're gonna place ourselves in 1781. And this is at the end of the war, in a way, if you think that the war ends in 1783. But if you were talking to your students or teaching a class about the American Revolution, what are some things that your students would know about people of African descent during the Revolutionary War? Or what kind of preconceptions do you believe that they might have? What are some things that your students might think that people of African descent were doing, how they participated in the war? What are some ways that your students might be thinking of people of African descent during the war?
They would know that many of the ones that are fighting for the British
Oh.
ran away.
Mhm. Oh, okay.
They would know that because we start with Dunmore's proclamation in 1770. Well, I teach college, so that
okay.
might be a little different. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm like, oh wow, your
Okay, let
students
me be
do know a lot.
quiet.
No, that's great. I'm glad you're.
Yeah. So we start with 1775 with Dunmore's proclamation,
Okay.
and so they know that the men are running away for a promise of freedom.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's, yeah.
Okay.
I'll be quiet.
No, that's no, please chime in. Yeah, what about other people? Like, what would your students say if you ask them, what do you know about people of African descent during the American Revolution? Maybe they might not know much, or
Coming in, I don't think that they know anything.
okay.
I think that their idea of the American Revolution is of a bunch of white people fighting each other. And so hopefully by the end of the unit, they understand that wasn't the case. Hopefully.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that people, kids, have this preconception that it was, white men fighting each other. That was the revolution. But again, like I mentioned earlier, that's our goal. Like, we're trying to tell this complicated, diverse story through all of these different, ways that we have assembled at the museum. So, okay, so here we have our launch page. So in 1781, over 200,000 enslaved men, women, and children labored in Virginia's fields, kitchens, stables, and shops. So we're going to discover through these 5 stories the difficult decisions that both free and enslaved people of African descent made when the Revolutionary War tears through Virginia at the end of the war. So if we go into their stories here, you'll see that we have 5 people here. So we have, sorry, let me just go back to the people. So we have Eve, who's living in Williamsburg. We have London here, who is, he actually is a 15-year-old boy who joins the British Army. And then we also tell the story through another side. We tell the story of Jack, who actually joins the American Army. And then I'm going to focus on Deborah. And the reason I'm choosing Deborah, each of these 5 stories, so there's another one hiding here. This is Andrew. So all of these 5 stories are really, really rich and really, really amazing to kind of launch into with your students. The reason that I'm choosing Deborah is I think this is an amazing story because Deborah actually escapes from George Washington's Mount Vernon. So, this is something that is difficult oftentimes to talk with about students. George Washington himself owned enslaved people. So this is a really interesting story of a woman who escaped from Mount Vernon. So, and we do this Finding Freedom in very kind of simple language that you could use for a 5th grader, or you could also use in the college level, I think. So let's go into Deborah's story. And it's really amazing to think of these, these were actual real people that lived during the Revolution. So my name is Deborah. I grew up with my family at Mount Vernon, enslaved to George Washington. And a lot of people who come to our museum are surprised that we use this word enslaved instead of a slave. And we do this because we want to show that these people were owned by another person. So saying enslaved person rather than slave does remind people of the humanity of the person who is in the condition of being owned by the other person. So we always use this word enslaved rather than a slave.
Do you say enslaved to or enslaved by?
I would say,
They were enslaved by George.
oh, so it says here enslaved to George
I
Washington.
just,
Okay.
I teach African American history, so
Oh, okay, so would you?
yeah, you should say by.
Oh, and so, okay, I'm gonna make a note.
Slavery was put upon them.
Yes.
That's why you're using enslaved.
Right.
It's not
Okay.
some, yeah, okay.
Okay. No, thank you for telling me. No, thank you for telling me that. I'm gonna point that out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So yeah,
Mhm.
so since she was very small, she dreamed of being free. So again, when you, oh, and then you could also, we have these information kind of hotspots also. So you could click on these information hotspots. Why is that? Yeah, so this talks about how Washington himself had a farm manager, actually by the name of Lund Washington. And while running away was widespread in Virginia, many enslaved people were unsuccessful. Of course, slave catchers policed all but the most remote areas. So we talk about, different ways that enslaved people were, sorry, I'm just trying to get back to.
Get a little bigger.
Yeah.
That's okay, I can see.
You could see it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so let me just go, just 1 second. I'm trying to get back to, okay, sorry, I'm just gonna go back to there. Okay, yeah, so we're gonna go back into Deborah's story now. Okay, here she is. Okay, so Washington left for war when I was a little girl. Years passed and I was 16 when a huge British ship sailed up to the farm. The British threatened to burn Washington's home if they were not supplied with food. People were frightened, but there were rumors that the British were harboring runaways. Now, this is after of course, the Dunmore Proclamation, but this is after another proclamation that was issued in 79, the Phillipsburg Proclamation, that is offering freedom to any enslaved person, not only those people that are taking up arms. So we're not, Deborah didn't leave a journal or a diary, so we're not really sure how much she and the fellow people that were working with her in Mount Vernon knew, but we know what happens next, which is our overseer ordered us to bring livestock and sacks of food to the British ship. We climbed aboard to deliver the food, but the soldiers taught us to stay and leave with them. If I went with the British, would I just be a slave for a new master? Or was this my chance at freedom? What should I do? So here we have, I don't want to give this away now, but we have information on those who stayed in Mount Vernon and those who fled on the British ship. So this is actually my favorite part of this interactive. So this is what you could do with your students. You could have a really great discussion here on what would you do? Because of course, this was not an easy decision. A lot of times people think, yes, all of the enslaved people, of course they fled to freedom, but that's not necessarily true. This was a very tough decision. So what would you do? Okay, if I return to the shore, I may never have another chance to be free. Or if I go with the British, I could be caught and punished or sold off somewhere. I may never see my family again. So I want you to think for a little bit and tell me, what do you think Deborah does? Do you think she returns to shore? Because, well, let's think about this for a minute. What do you think? Why would she have contemplated staying there, returning to shore? What are some things that your students might say about this? Why might she stay? Any ideas what your students might might have said about this?
The teacher's going to participate. I mean, I know the answers,
Yeah,
but
no.
I know the teacher's going to participate.
No. Tell me, please. Yeah, because no, I just want to stop here because this was not an easy decision at
Yeah.
all. You know, she had her family there, her loved ones. So, you know, if she escapes, she may never see her family again. So this is, you know, so anyone want to take a guess? What do you think she does? Just pick one of them.
Come on, teachers.
Well, I think I would probably have students kind of have like a small group discussion and think about the pros and cons
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
decisions. And of course, you know, every enslaved person has their own circumstances or their own reasons for leaving or staying. And I think maybe having more context to Deborah's biography, her life,
Mhm.
might allow students kind of think about what Deborah might do, or if they were in in Deborah's position, given her experiences up to this point, they probably would have some thoughts about whether to
Yeah,
leave or not. So
What was
that's
Deborah's life like?
yeah, see,
To
that,
ask. So she's
that's
enslaved. She's working in a probably tobacco field. She might not do what her mother and father does there, but she might have to bring water to people, clear the trash in the fields. You know.
yeah.
So what was life like?
Yeah, and that's a great these are great questions. And unfortunately, for all of these people that we're featuring, we don't really have many primary sources. Of course, enslaved people were not given the option to learn to read or to write. So we don't have their diaries, their journals. So I could kind of show you some primary sources that we do have though. So, okay, let's say.
Can I just say that
Sure.
you might not be able to get that period,
Yeah.
right? Like for the 18th century, but there's a really good book called Children Stolen.
Oh, okay.
And it's the 19th century, but you can kind of get an idea because it's still the South and it's still children.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you might be able to, maybe you couldn't get that particular century, but you can get an idea of what a child's life is. You know, like a child. I was just looking, I don't know if everybody saw Civil War last night with NBC. Brad Pitt and Henry Louis Gates did a, especially it's on Peacock if you want to go back and look at it. But they were showing children and Going with the Wind, and the children are standing there as the white young ladies are sleeping, fanning. You know, it's late at night. These white women are sleeping and they're fanning them while they sleep. So, you know, like you get an idea of what life might have been for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that's okay. I really wish we did have more information on.
Yeah. Children Stolen. Take a look at them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So let's just say, stay. Let's say, you know, your students, this is a really great spot to have a conversation and, you know, ask your students, what would you do? Have them debrief this and think about all of the reasons why Deborah might choose to stay or she might choose to go. So I'm just going to click on stay. So then it says, you chose to stay, but Deborah chose to go. If Deborah had stayed in Mount Vernon, she would have remained with those closest to her and in relative safety, but she still would be enslaved. Instead, she joined a group of 17 people, enslaved people from Mount Vernon, who sought safety and freedom with the British Army.
Do you know how old Deborah was?
I don't know. I think she probably was about 18 at the time, because I know she's going to get married in a little bit when she's 20. So if we continue her story, we could talk about Deborah in the British Army. So the British promised us protection from slave catchers and our old masters. Freedom would be ours when the war was over, or so we hoped. In the meantime, we followed the army and worked hard in camp. So we know that Deborah washed, she cooked, she served the officers. Some other women nursed the sick and wounded. Hunger, fear, and disease were our constant companions. So if you click here, you could learn a little bit more about camp followers. So let's see what happens to her. Okay, summer wore on. One day I was ordered to board another ship. I was going to New York. There I saw thousands living in makeshift shacks and barracks by the harbors. Many were runaways. People were playing music and telling stories, and this is where she meets Harry. Okay, and here you could learn a little bit more about community in wartime. So all of these hot spots will give you and your students some additional information. Okay, so in Virginia, a slave could not legally marry, but now I was free, and Harry and I became husband and wife. I miss my family in Virginia, but Harry was my family now. We were happy and safe behind British lines. And then here you could delve into a little bit further about a recognized marriage. Okay. So the Americans won the war, which is, you know, interesting to think about what happened to these people that did join the British. And of course, a panic rose in the streets. Would we be thrown to the mercy of our old masters? Men and women clung to their freedom, clamoring for a place on ships that were evacuating loyalists. Harry and I were among the lucky ones. We were granted passage out of bondage. We left our old lives behind and set out to start anew in Nova Scotia. So here you could read about perhaps maybe some different outcomes of some other people. Deborah was among the lucky ones. And then, yeah, and then here we talk about Deborah's stories continues. So if you read here, we do know that Deborah did leave for Nova Scotia along with 3,000 other freedom seekers of African descent, many of whom formed the Birchtown settlement. And they named their new home after the British general who gave them what was called birch passes, these passes who would allow them to be evacuated from New York. And so we know that in Birchtown, the refugees received small plots of uncultivated land. Unfortunately, many died in the harsh winter that followed. But despite this hardship, this free Black community developed a rich spiritual life anchored by the charismatic Methodist preacher. So unfortunately, Harry is not listed in the census and his fate is unknown. And so here you could, of course, explore the other stories, but I also love this interactive because we do list all of these different primary sources that the museum used to build these stories. So here are all of the sources that we used for Deborah. For example, we have a birch pass here that would have been given to former enslaved people that would grant them passage to the British lines. And then we also have George Washington's letter to Lund, Washington, who was in charge of his, this is actually interesting. I actually transcribed this one here. This is actually interesting because George Washington is very upset at Lund, his I think it's like his second cousin, because he's telling Lund, well, why did you give food to the British officers? Why did you let, the enslaved people on to give food to the British officers? Because I didn't want to give them food. I would have rather had my house burned down. He actually does say this in the letter, which is kind of amazing. So yeah, so this is just one story, Deborah. But if we go back, we could look at, so this is what I'm actually going to do now. Let's go back. Let me go to, again, so here, if you go on our website, you could go on interactive features, Finding Freedom Launch Interactive. And I'm going to give you about 10 minutes now to explore one of the other 5 stories. So we have Eve, who is struggling to keep her family together in Williamsburg. We have London, who is fighting with the British Army. We have Jack, he's actually a very, very interesting story. We just talked about Deborah. And then the last one that's kind of hidden here is Andrew, who is actually fighting for the revolutionaries. So
What do you mean by rebel? You mean the Patriots?
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Exactly. Yeah. So he's fighting with the Continental Army. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to explore one of these other 5 stories. So again, if you go to our website, which is AmRev Museum, and if you go into interactives and Finding Freedom, that's where you will be able to find this. If you want, I could put it in the chat, but I think you guys could find it, hopefully.
And then you want us to sign back on? Is that
So just maybe you could just maybe close.
downsize?
Yeah, exactly. Close this window. And then after we come back, we'll talk about some of these other stories. And then I'm going to show you some teacher resources that we have along with the Finding Freedom Interactive. Yeah, so again, just let me know if anyone cannot find it. Okay, is everyone good? Is everyone able to find it?
Is it amrev.org.com?
So it's amrevmuseum.org.
Right.
Yeah, so, or if
.org.
you just type in like in Google, Museum of the American Revolution.
Okay. And
Or I could put it in the chat. Let me see if I could.
but once we're there, how do you get on to?
Yeah, so yeah, let me show you. Yeah, so once you get on here, let me go into this again. Yeah, let me just. Yeah, so here's our main website. And then you would just go on to Learn and Explore.
Learn and explore.
Yeah, and then interactive features, Finding Freedom.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll come back at about 4:10. Okay, everyone, about 5 more minutes. Okay, everyone, just 1 more minute. Okay. All right, well, hopefully that was enough time for you to explore one of these fascinating stories. Would anyone like to share which story they delved into, and how their person's story was similar or different to Deborah's story?
I
Anyone?
chose Andrew.
Okay.
And I guess I had questions in terms of, I think as I read through his story, I later found that he was an enslaved person. It didn't really mention in the beginning. So I guess, if I had students to go through, I would probably have them write down in their notebooks, like a list of questions that comes to
Okay.
them as
Yeah.
going through the story, and then I guess after going through the story, they can have a conversation about what questions came to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, why did he chose to fight with the American patriots versus the British? What, again, you know, like trying to maybe explore primary sources to kind of get a sense of
Yeah,
where he came. You know, was he sold? Was he purchased? Was he, you know, did he come from a different plantation, or was he born in that in that plantation? So and kind of try to find enough evidence to kind of speculate, but or even to kind of just provide theories in terms of what life was like for Andrew and what prompted him to fight for the American, or, you know, if they were to explore similar lived experiences of why enslaved people would fight with the American patriots. What, you know, because maybe they were hoping that by fighting with the American, they believed in liberty, but hopefully that would be extended to enslaved people. But just again, having those conversations, but having students, because I like to kind of push the inquiry-based learning. And so for students to have these questions, and it gives them an opportunity to do the research for themselves.
Yeah, that's actually a really great activity. And again, here you could see on my screen here, we do have primary sources for each of the 5 individuals. So you could, you know, have your students write down a list of questions and then delve into these primary sources. So that's a really, really great activity to do. Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to share what they, which person they focused on and how they could use that perhaps in the classroom? If not, no worries. I could go into.
You know, I'm going to talk, but okay. Carrie, do you want to talk? Come on.
Please, please.
Okay. Huh? Come on. What do you tell your students? Come on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So actually what I thought of as I was looking through this, so I teach 10th grade and 11th and 12th grade AP, and that in the 10th grade, our students that, you know, we have students that are fairly literate through students that are reading at a college level. And so what I really liked about this site is that the way you know, a lot of the text is pretty simple and would be appropriate, like that narrative form for our lower level readers. But then I think that, you know, it would be easy to do something that involves those primary sources. So, I mean, for our student body and the 10th graders in particular, I think any of the stories would be useful.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I'm about to show you all of the rich teacher resources we have for all of the teachers. So anyone else want to share their?
Let's see if I can get Mary Beth to talk.
Okay.
Oh, honey, you don't want me to start talking? I'll never stop.
Right. Okay.
Good.
So I read about Jack.
Okay.
And fascinating story.
Yes, yes.
And I do agree with Carrie that I like the narrative part because it makes it more accessible to many people. I did have a question though. I also looked at Andrew briefly. In the part where you're kind of choosing stay or go.
Yes.
In both Jack and Andrew, the question was, what should I do? But for Deborah, your question was, what would you do? So you're asking students to put themselves in the place of an enslaved individual, which I don't think anybody could possibly do. But in the other ones, you didn't. And I was wondering if that was a conscious choice or just a
Oh, no, just, you know, whichever you feel would work best for your students.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either one, it's really up to the teachers what to do with that. Yeah, probably would make sense, right? What would Deborah do? What would Jack do? What would Andrew do? So you know, we like to use empathy, but of course it's hard for a 5th grader or a 3rd grader to put themselves in the shoes. So yeah, that's a great question. Anyone else before I just go into the teacher resources?
Well, I'm not going to dwell on it,
Yeah,
but
go
I just chose the other woman who was Eve. Because I just think that we don't know enough about women in the American Revolution, particularly, I mean, white or black. And
I agree.
So learning more about women and how they experienced the war, I was interested in knowing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love the stories of women during the war. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's really, really so interesting. But okay, so I only have about 10-15 minutes left. What I want to show you now is, so we have this amazing interactive, and I'm glad that you all you know, found it interesting. Hopefully it can be useful to you. But what we have also created, if you go right here, is we have teacher resources for all of these individuals and all of these. So what we do here is we have 7 different units. So we go into the background of 18th century, sorry, my screen is, 18th century African-American identities. We have slavery in American life, agency and resistance. I'm just going to go into this one really quickly and show you the activities that you could find. So how we structure our teacher resources is, first we have a big idea. So if you go into big idea 5, it will basically give you and your students a good background. Actually, let's view it on the PDF. So this is something that you could photocopy for your students, and it's kind of like an introduction to the activities. So we have slavery, liberty, and natural rights, contradictions of slavery and freedom, and they're usually about 4 pages. So, you know, it might be too much for your students to read in class, but you could always assign it for homework. That's, you know, what some teachers that I talk to have done. And then we go into the activities. So let me just go into the activities for you. Okay, so if we go into the activities, how we structure the activities is basically kind of like a pick and choose for you. So we have the aims and objectives. So you could read about the aims and objectives here. We have the materials all laid out clear for you, because we know that you are very, very busy. So we want to make this as easy as possible. And then we have procedures. We have different activities that with different amounts of time. So like the engagement activities are always shorter. And then we have longer activities that we call development activities. So here we have one we call differing definitions. So if I go to, you could read a little bit about this. Basically, this is going to ask students to think about some different words and how different people would have viewed these words, liberty and slavery. What would these 2 words have meant for Deborah, Eve, George Washington, and Peyton Randolph? Eve was enslaved to Peyton Randolph. So let's go into the, I could show you, we actually have a worksheet here that you could print out for your students. So, you know, based on what you have read in Finding Freedom, use the following chart to explore what you believe people would have used. How would they have used the word liberty and slavery? What would these words mean to the following 4 people? And again, you know, this is depending on what age group you are teaching. You know, this could be as, you know, you could spend a whole hour on this activity, or you could spend 20 minutes on this activity. Again, so let's go back into the activities. And then we have a culmination activity at the end of each of our units. And these are kind of good for ending the lesson or for something that the students could either extend or do a project on. So this one is particularly, I know that some teachers have used this successfully. So some people argue that revolutionaries who were slave owners were people of their time, meaning that they were only doing what was common and normal for the era in which they lived. These people also argue that revolutionaries who were slave owners or profited from slavery should not be held up to our standards today. So what are the arguments for and against supporting this perspective? Whose experiences in the 1700s does this argument prioritize? And do you agree or disagree with this argument? So this is really obviously something that students can really think about here. And then for each of these units, we also have extensions and adaptations. So again, these are kind of like pick and choose. Of course, you don't have to do all of them. You might go through this and, oh, I like these, I like the primary source investigations. I would like to show you one more if we have time. Yes, we do. So one other one I want to show you, of course, we have London and Andrew, who were, and also Jack, of course, who were wartime, who were directly involved in the armies of the war. So here again, we have the big idea 7. So again, the big ideas are a background for you and your students. Again, you could print them out, they could read them in class, they could take them home. This is actually really, I love this one, Wartime Experiences. It talks about spying in the revolution, soldiers and sailors on both sides of the revolution, camp followers. Here, of course, we talk about Lord Dunmore's proclamation, the challenges of soldiering and spycraft. We talk about what people were doing on the home front, right? Not everyone was fighting in the war. But then we do a little comparison here. If we go to the activities, we could go to worksheet A, and just like we do not want to print that. Just like I was showing you earlier, you could, I don't know why this is doing this, sorry. Let me go back to this. Yeah, so we could do kind of like a little comparison. Probably gonna stop sharing my screen now anyway. Yeah, so again, all of these activities are kind of like pick and choose. You don't have to do one, you don't have to do all of them. They're just really kind of ways that will help teachers explore the Finding Freedom resource. And also, of course, usually these are for middle school students, but you could kind of ramp it up if you teach high school or if you teach college or, younger students, you could down it a little bit. But yeah, so I only have a couple more minutes. I was wondering if anyone has any questions about, can you see yourself using this in the classroom? I will also put in the chat right now. Let me see, I'm going to put these 2 links in the chat for you. We actually have a PD, if you would like to join on Wednesday evening, about growing up in the Revolutionary War, which is quite interesting. And then I'm also going to put in here for you a link to all of our activities.
Am I supposed to know what PD is?
Oh, sorry. It's professional development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot, but I was like,
yeah. Let me see why this is not. Yeah. So you know what I'm going to do? I have this in my Dropbox. I'm going to share it with you later. I have everyone's email address.
Yeah, could you just email me what you want us to look at? Because sometimes getting it from the chat, and I have another Zoom at 4:30.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I can see myself even use. I teach community college, so
okay.
I have those students who don't know anything about African Americans in the in the American Revolution coming to me, you know, so
Okay. Yeah, good. I'm
I
glad.
think that, you know, so I mean, I didn't know, I teach African American history, and I didn't know about Deborah and Eve.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm glad I signed on. I mean, I know about only Judge. Everybody knows about
Yes,
Judge,
yes,
but
yes.
there are other players in this story. But what I wanted to just say, if I could give you like a kind
Sure,
critique,
sure.
you have the characters talking, but it's not in their voice.
Sorry, say this again.
Your characters that are speaking,
Yes.
it's not in their voice.
Oh, okay.
Because an enslaved person in Virginia in the 1780s would not say makeshift tents.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I didn't, I
I'm
wasn't.
just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
it's just
I think
it's just a
yeah,
honest critique.
yeah, no, I agree. I think that they probably were doing that maybe to, you know, get the story across for.
I understand that you're doing it so that the students will understand.
Yeah.
But I think, I'm not even saying you have to put it in broken or dialect English, but I think you have to put it in a level of English that the people spoke.
Okay.
So that's just my critique.
Yeah. No. I will definitely.
It is their voice that you're saying they said this. So it's just something to think about, and maybe they can take it under.
Yeah, no, I will definitely pass that on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's their voice. So you have to give it to them, you know. So anyway, that's the only, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah. There was a whole lot of tits all around, but they, you know, they wouldn't say makeshift.
Yeah.
Said. Okay, just like that. But thank you, because I'm going to check this out. I love teaching American Revolution. I just did that chapter for my community college students, and I really enjoy it. So I'm going to really definitely.
Good. Yeah, and I have your email, so I will.
Yes. So send me that, and maybe I'll show up for the PD. Okay. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we actually have a PD Wednesday evening. I don't know why my screen is frozen, but I'm going to send it to.
What time is it though?
It's Wednesday at 7 o'clock. It's about James Forten and growing up in the American Revolution. So
this one. Oh, so you don't have it every Wednesday?
No, it's just this coming up Wednesday.
Oh, okay. Okay. I do something at that time, but is there any way to like be able to listen to it later?
You know, we might be recording it, so I will let
let me know.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Karina.
Really good. I'm going to check it out.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye.
I'm having fun on your workshops. You know, I've come to a few. What's your name again in the conference?
Gorman.
Gorman knows me. And I'm just like, come on, teachers. Let's.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, it's good. It's good to get them.
No problem.